Welcome back to Virtual School Assembly. Today our guest is David Stegall. David is the Deputy Superintendent of Innovation for the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. During COVID-19, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper named Dr. Stegall co-chair of the statewide COVID-19 Education and Nutrition Response Work Group. Prior to being appointed as the Deputy State Superintendent, he was the VP of GEMS Education for the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia regions of the world. And we're going to get into that today about how he ended up over there for a while and then now he's back. Prior to his work abroad, Dr. Stegall served as superintendent for the Newton Conover schools, and Dr. Stegall was named the Northwest North Carolina Superintendent of the Year in 2017 and a National Superintendent Watch List in 2016. He was previously named the Outstanding Young Educator for North Carolina in 2012. Now, that is a mouthful, but we are so grateful to have you on the show today, Dr. Stegall. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Tyler. I appreciated you reaching out, and excited to make connections with fellow educators and like-minded leaders in our country. So glad to be on today.
Now, David, as we start into this, I'd like you to just start with your story, because you've kind of been all over the place. I know you started as a teacher in inner city schools and you grew up with some unique circumstance. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit of your story, and then we'll get into some questions after that.
That'd be great. I grew up in a very diverse inner city environment, high poverty, teenage parents, some substance abuse, but we had strong faith. I grew up in a house of faith. Many students have tough situations growing up, and I saw inequities all around me. I did notice, though, I think as a lot of students do, you start noticing those who succeed, and you realize there's something different about some people. They act different, the way they carry themselves, the way they act towards others, and I knew that that's what I admired. That's what I wanted to be like. I wanted to make sure that my children and my grandchildren were given opportunities and had choices that maybe I didn't as a young child. I did make connections and was blessed to be around people that were from our neighborhood, from our community, that went on to be very successful. And one thing that was both a blessing and a curse for me is I've always had this growth mindset that even if I get discouraged, if I fail, I never let it define me. I'm one to quickly jump back up and say, what's next? Let's try something else. The blessing is I don't get beat down, and the curse is I don't think there's anything that I'm not willing to try. So sometimes I get in over my head, but I think it's given me lots of opportunities, and I've tried to instill that with those students that I've worked with, as well as my own children. If you grow up in the inner city and you grow up in poverty, you realize sometimes your parents and those in your community, they don't know how to open doors. It's not that they don't want it. It's not that they're not working hard. They were never taught how to rise up out of poverty in a way that's sustainable. And those cycles tend to keep happening over and over. I did realize really early that those who seemed to succeed often went to college. So I knew early on that if there was an opportunity for college, I wanted to be given that opportunity. I wanted to push for it. It wasn't like someone said, you have to go, or this is the only jobs that you can get will be because of college. And there's lots of opportunities that don't necessarily require college. But I knew I wanted to keep pushing myself, and I wanted that seat at the table where my voice was heard, those that are like me was heard. We've heard there's lots of publications around, Simon Sinek being one in particular, talks about that moonshot thinking. And I didn't realize how much I embraced that approach and leaned on my faith. I didn't know all the answers, but I followed my passions. And I'll give you an example of how following your passions, instead of trying to be the best at something or make the most money or seek out a title, following passions is much more sustainable. I paid for my way through college. I worked loading trucks at UPS, odd jobs, worked at night and went to school during the day. I went to school and declared as a finance major. And the only reason I declared as a finance major is I wanted to be a millionaire. I wanted to make lots of money. I wanted to have things that I didn't grow up having. I was given an opportunity to coach Little League. I played sports all throughout high school and Legion ball and lots of baseball. And so I wanted to coach Little League. And I spent a year with an 11 and 12-year-old team, and it was probably the most impactful time I've ever had. I realized that I am most happy working, helping others grow and helping others see the strengths they have inside. So without any consultation with my family or with a counselor, I switched my major to education, knowing money wasn't necessarily in education. I say that to let you know, I went to school to be a finance major thinking I would make $1 million. And then those of you who know much about history in the US, in 2008, the economy kind of tanked, and it happened in 2000 as well. And we're in something similar now. I don't know that I would have been as successful had I chased money or titles, but by chasing my passion, I've been given a ton of opportunities that have been both financially and rewarding in other ways to me, because it was what I believed in. So education gave me my shot, my opportunity. I think many people have that similar story of how education is what gives them the shot in life. When I became a teacher, a little bit hard-headed, again, not knowing what I don't know, and not necessarily thinking I can, I had that mindset, I want to try anything. I'm not going to let anything keep me from taking on challenges. I noticed that elementary ed, there weren't many males in education, and there certainly weren't many males in kindergarten through second grade age. So I decided I was going to be a K-2 teacher, not because I was an amazing K-2 teacher per se, but I knew that those kids needed to see male role models. I knew that they would learn from someone who had a similar perspective in life that I had. And it turned out to be the best decision I could have made. I worked only in high poverty schools, very diverse schools, many times 80 to 90% minority populations. And I made connections, lifelong connections, and made impacts, I feel, from what my students were able to share with me. They saw male role models. They saw themselves through someone who had similar circumstances. I went on to be an administrator, principal, assistant principal, and lots of stops. And it doesn't matter necessarily the stops I had. I was a curriculum director, associate superintendent, lots of different things, but they're all in high poverty schools. And every stop that I was at was always a tough situation. And I didn't try to come in with I'm going to fix anything, or there's this magic program that we should all be trying, or this is the one and only way to do things. I focused on attitude and a belief system. I didn't let any of the students settle. I didn't let our staff settle. I didn't let those stakeholders that worked with our children settle. We had to have a belief system that they all deserved the best in life. They had just as much skill, if fostered and grown, as any student in any school. Through some of my accomplishments and those around me that really have pushed me, I was able to move to a diverse district as a superintendent. I spent 11 years in the district. A little bit about the district, to give you some perspective. It was one of the lower performing districts in North Carolina, very diverse. There's 115 school districts in North Carolina, 1.6 million students, 115 school districts. Well, this district was the 98th ranked on performance composite out of the 115, so near the bottom. In their 90-plus year history, they had 2 athletic state championships ever. I focused on what worked for me: mindset, empowerment, a belief system, not settling, personalized pathways, figuring out what your strengths are, fostering those strengths, helping you see people that and opportunities that are similar to yours and see that you could find success. In fact, one of the things we did, North Carolina allows students to drop out actually at age 16. We all know that dropouts tend to not have near as many opportunities, and there's lots of research over lifelong earnings, the quality of health care for them and their family. It impacts every part of your life. I didn't think dropout was a term we should even embrace or allow. So I approached our General Assembly, and we had a bill passed just for my district. It ended up gathering 2 other districts along the way to raise the dropout rate to 18. We didn't allow students to drop out. We actually took them to court if they dropped out. I wasn't going to let them quit on themselves. So we ended up setting the state record on graduation rate, 96.1%, a very, very diverse, 25% of our students were non-English speaking district. We ended up going from the 98th out of 115 districts to one of the top quartile, top 25% in academics. We went from having 2 state championships in athletics in 90 plus years to 14 state championships in 6 different sports, by the way, in 11 years. It wasn't because we brought in ringers and brought in different families or students or teachers. We focused on empowerment. We had a minority male mentoring program. I took money from the general fund and offered innovative grants. I had parents and teachers that would say, if we only did things this way, our kids could be successful. If we were only allowed to do this, we could be more successful. So I created micro grants and said, write up your proposal, tell me what you think might work. And I gave students money to try it out. And all I said was, if it works, we'll scale it up. And if it doesn't, now we know, we've tried. And we can learn from it and see what what we gained from it and what we didn't. We gave these innovative grants to teachers, to students, to parents, and it changed the mindset of, oh man, I can't keep making excuses and griping. I got to try, and I got to be part of the solution and not the problem. And what we saw was success breeds success. People started wanting to be around our students. Teachers wanted to come to work in our district. Those positive mindsets attract positive mindsets. And this isn't unique to teaching. This isn't unique to education. But education impacts lives like little other in the world. I was, with the success we had, I was given a lot of opportunities to lead projects in Poland, of all places. I would have never thought I'd have gone to Poland, but I was given through university, they asked me to go work with some teachers in Poland. And Adam Mickiewicz University is the place. I got to go to Hawaii to lead. That's a rough place to have to go, to work with teachers and a teacher prep program in Hawaii. Lots of diverse places. And I made connections around the world, and I realized we sometimes are U.S.-centric in North America. We think we're the only ones dealing with what we're dealing with. And I realized all the issues that other countries are struggling with, and that students are students around the world. I was blessed to be reached out by a company, GEMS Education was shared. They're the largest education company in the world. They actually go into countries that don't have public schools. They put schools in places where the working class don't get to send their children. Most of the schooling is fee-based private schools. So this company went in and they worked in countries or cities like Dubai and Abu Dhabi, very wealthy, Saudi Arabia, very wealthy countries, and built top of the line, top quality schools throughout the world, K-12. And from the money those parents paid, they took that and all that revenue went to building schools in Ethiopia and Egypt and Oman and Qatar and Bahrain. And those students had very little opportunities had that company not come in. And I got to be vice president focused on U.S. curriculum schools. The large majority of the schools there are U.S. curriculum. Other countries want to be like us, which blew me away. And I was able to help establish schools, hire teachers, provide opportunities in a place that may not have had that opportunity otherwise, giving voices to those who didn't have it. We did things like Shark Tanks, giving students opportunities to provide innovative solutions and things similar to what I did as a superintendent. We empowered our students. Things like water quality are a huge issue in the Manasseh region, Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. Poverty, safety, healthcare. We partnered our students up with very successful businesses. Lots of businesses, US-based businesses, are in the Middle East. In particular, where I lived in the UAE and Dubai, there were tons of companies that are looking for human capital. And we worked with these students to work alongside some of the best leaders in the world and come up with solutions. And that, unbelievably, that led to international recognitions for these students. It led to patents. We had 14 patents in 1 year from students creating projects around great world problems. And it led to jobs for students who otherwise may not have even gotten an education. They were now getting hired by Fortune 500 companies. I did leave that company this past summer and came back to North Carolina, and I was asked to be the Deputy State Superintendent. One of the roles they asked me to focus on is innovation. And that's like saying, when someone asks what's innovation, it's like trying to describe happiness. It's finding, solutions to problems is all it is. And I get to work alongside some great educators across our state and then outside of our state as well. We're focusing really on providing equitable access and opportunities. The same things I dealt with as a student, the same things I saw as a teacher and a principal, wanted to provide support for underperforming schools and districts in our state. One of the key things we're noticing is internet access is a huge barrier. It's an equity issue in our state. And with COVID-19, we have 30 to 40% of our students, other than their phone, which may not have minutes or internet access all the time, they don't have internet capabilities or device to access the world. And we're focusing on providing solutions for some of those. We're doing innovative assessment pilots in our state. You don't have to just do a bubble test to prove that you understand content. We're giving students opportunities to show credit by demonstration mastery. The reason that's important, some of our students that come from tough situations can often show you easier than they can bubble a test. They can show you or create products that show their grasp of the knowledge and the content. So we're working on giving those differentiated pathways for success. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Let students find their strengths, what they're really strong at, ways to show the mastery of the content. we've partnered with a brand new nonprofit in our state called My Future NC, and there are other states. Tennessee, I know, is doing it as well. And we're working with companies across our state to provide high quality credentials or post-secondary degrees for up to 2 million students as our goal by 2030. Reason that's important, textiles is big in our state, furniture is big in our state, and not everyone needs a 4-year degree to be very successful and have opportunities to provide for their family and change the destiny of their own children. And so we're helping those students that don't necessarily see a 4-year university as the pathway for their passion. There are high quality credentials that can open up doors and give them opportunities to be successful in fields that they are strong in and have a desire for. As was mentioned, COVID hit this past March, and the governor of our state put together a task force to focus on education, focused on childcare, focused on nutrition. And he named myself and the Deputy State Director of Health and Human Services to oversee that task force. It's been quite an undertaking. Just like you students and staff and others across the U.S., we're learning as we go. We've been focused on how do we personalize learning for students when they're at home or they don't have internet access. How can we move towards, instead of a standards-based, test-based education system, to more of a competency-based? Show what you can do, show it through products or proficiencies other than just a standardized test. We know that not one size fits all. You know, our students are struggling with social and emotional issues. We're trying to reach out and to provide support for those students that are, you know, dealing with issues beyond academics at home. We have helped students and tried to help students understand they shouldn't lose connection with the world, even though there is physical distancing. And resilience is going to be a big key to what we're going to have to try to develop in students. Some people, like myself, are blessed to be born with a sense of resilience. I didn't earn it. It's the way I'm wired. But it is a skill that you can develop. And so we want to help students to not give up and to take failure and bumps in the road as opportunities to grow and learn about themselves. One good thing that we are seeing, and we're helping our students understand, a lot of the opportunities in our state, students, you know, felt they had to stay in our state to, you know, they didn't want to move away from home. But we're seeing companies like Google, large tech companies, open up permanent options that are remote only. And so our students, we're trying to help them see that it's not just North Carolina, it's not just the U.S. You can really work anywhere in the world. And you might not physically have to be there. You may get to be there. The world is flattening, as we know. We're getting access to all parts of the world now, and we're connected more than ever. But we shouldn't just limit ourselves to the town we were born in, unless that's just your passion and where you want to stay. We shouldn't limit ourselves to an opportunity that we heard because our parents did it or because someone in our community does it. We want them to see all the millions of opportunities that exist for their future. So one of the things I like to share with students, and I say some of these phrases when students just kind of come back with excuses, because I had those excuses as well. Regardless of where you are in the world or where you've been, I've learned you're not alone in your situation. We feel it a lot of times. I do. My own 2 children do. You're not bound by your circumstance. You know, that there are a lot of people who have had much worse circumstances than I had and who have done extremely well in life and thrived. We all deserve success, and education opens that door for you. And your attitude, I've worked with lots of companies and lots of groups and lots of many states, and I found that your attitude, your work ethic, and your resilience matter way more than your surname, your race, your background, or your GPA. You've heard the phrase, what did they call the doctor who graduated last in his class? They call him doctor. Nobody asks your GPA when you get out of college. And most people don't ask it outside of high school unless you're going on to college. So your work ethic, your resilience, and your attitude is what will open up doors for you. And education can be that equity equalizer if you take advantage of it.
Awesome. Well, David, you've probably seen I've been taking notes this whole time because I'm like, I want to talk about that. No, I want to talk about that. And so what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to go back to the early part of your story, and then we'll come back to some of the things you're doing now and some of the issues that you're seeing, both in North Carolina, but just globally as well. As you mentioned, the world is flattening, and so a lot of these issues are relevant to everyone. When you mentioned when you were going through your own education, and you switched from finance to education, that you decided to follow your passion instead of chasing the money. However, it's been interesting to note that as you've gone through your career, you haven't stayed an elementary school teacher the whole time. And I think often we have kids that are watching this that are thinking, yeah, I might want to be a teacher or a coach one day. I want to be involved with students. And I think they don't realize that there are a lot of other positions in the education world that are possibilities. I'm guessing, I might be wrong here, but I'm guessing you had no clue what a superintendent or working for the state or anything like that meant when you were going through your own education. And even as an early educator, when you were teaching in elementary school, you probably had no clue what other doors might open for you in the future. So bearing that in mind, what could you tell students out there who are looking at potentially going into education as far as options, and what have you liked about moving from the classroom to then taking on more responsibilities and seeing more of the big picture kind of stuff?
Well, you're exactly right. When I went into education, I truly thought I would spend 30 years as a second grade teacher. And I maybe move within elementary, do some coaching, just like you said. And what opened my eyes is that I'm able to work with 25 to 30 students at a time and see the impact. And this inner drive in me, I saw that there are other opportunities to make larger scale. And it's not that teaching is any less or more important than any of the other jobs in education. I like challenges, and sometimes if you're willing to challenge yourself, education, just like many fields, will give you plenty of places to challenge yourself, whether it be working with a larger number of students and an instructional coach position, coaching teachers, or being an administrator. So yeah, and it is amazing how many different diverse opportunities there are in education, all through higher ed. There is plenty of connection in policy where I'm at the state level, down to the actual day-to-day helping with math lessons in the classroom. And so what led me to it is the will to, how else can I challenge myself? How much more of a difference can I hopefully make? And again, I keep going back to when I would see things, and when you're in inner city programs, you'll see things that make you bang your head. I'm sure any situation you do. And I found myself saying, man, I want to be part of the solution. You know what? I might not be any better, but at least I want to try, because I don't want to complain about it. So if I'm not willing to help fix the problem that I see, I just need to keep my mouth shut. And so I found myself, trying to help resolve problems, not because I wanted the title or anything like that. And in many ways, there are headaches with, the more responsibility you have, the more you're likely to fail and have, arrows shooting at you. But I found that if you do what's right and you're resilient, and again, that work ethic piece, and people see that you've got the right things as the right things, it seems to work out. Not that I'm successful in every aspect by any stretch, but people are drawn to those who they see have, enthusiasm, who are focused on the big picture, not themselves. And I kept seeing that I kept being surrounded by amazing teachers and educators, and I didn't want to let them, kept moving on to challenges so that I could help them be more successful as I went along. So education has probably as many opportunities, and it's like nursing or the healthcare. We're going to always need doctors and nurses, and we're going to always need educators, regardless of the economy or the changes in our society. Those are the backbones of our democracy, really.
Absolutely. Now, I think part of your journey has been finding the right fit, and where your strengths are feeling the greatest need. I think if I had to summarize your career, your current title works really well, because I'd say that you're an innovator, that you're creative, you think outside the box, and that's what's opened a lot of doors for you. But it's also something that I think you've kind of naturally gravitated towards. I'm in education, and I've turned down so many administrative positions because that's not my world. I like being in the classroom, and so it's finding the right fit. But I do want to talk about innovation for a minute here, because doors have opened for you because you are innovative, and that started somewhere. As you grew up and as you went through your own education, I'm guessing that you can probably find examples from your own life of thinking outside the box, trying something new, doing something in a different way. Can you give me an example or two of something maybe you did growing up to kind of break the norm and try something new?
Well, I hate to keep going back to the poverty piece. When you grow up with not a lot, you're very innovative by nature you create things that you can't go out and buy. So you become a craftsman, you become a problem solver. And I grew up in a family of doers. All my family were mechanics and bricklayers, and they were doers by nature. And there's a lot of problem solving that goes into that. You look at things in a solution mindset. You look at the what ifs. And so I just took that and I'd carry that over into each aspect of my life. When I look at things, I look at possibilities. I rarely look at anything as a finished product or as a closed door, even if it is closed. I rarely think of something as, well, there's no need to follow that. I constantly look at the what ifs. And so, yeah, being around workers and doers and those craftsmen in my life, I think really helped me see there's possibility in everything. And you don't waste a lot of stuff. You can reuse things over and over. And I think my career has been an example of that. You know, things that you've done in the past that might not have worked. It might have worked because it wasn't the right time, but in a new situation, it's the perfect fit, or at least informs you in the new situation. So you're right. Getting those experiences young, I'm sure, drastically impacted my worldview and my willingness to go, well, we can do that. Why not? Let's move forward.
All right. Well, let's keep talking about worldview, because one of the things that you mentioned I loved was this idea that the world is flattening. And I've certainly seen this in my own life. I've lived all over the United States in 5 or 6 different states. And it's one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because I realized that, growing up in a bubble where everyone thinks the same way and does the same things, that's not necessarily a horrible thing, but it's so awesome to go somewhere new and realize, oh, there's different ways of approaching this, thinking about this, doing this. And you've really taken that to the next level by living overseas and doing a lot of your work overseas. I'm just curious, what are just in your recent history, being overseas, what are some of the things that you learned, or maybe some of the things that you just really loved that you hadn't been exposed to before, that you had the opportunity of seeing while you were over there?
It's going to sound negative, and I will tell you it's not meant to be. My perception of living in the Middle East, I thought that as an American, I would be not very well received. Mm-hmm. I thought they would, I just had this worldview that we were the bad guys, or we were not going to be well received, and that most places didn't desire to. I thought in my mind our education system was probably viewed in a poor light. I worried that it was. And when I got over there, it was the exact opposite. One of the things I learned is most countries, I spent a lot of time with the Pakistani families, and I'm working with construction workers, and they work in the UAE building these huge buildings, but they're from Pakistan. And they're talking to me about our world leaders and policy to an extent I had to go research myself. They knew so much about our countries and our leaders and our policy and our impact on the world as a whole. And it really made me feel sad that I didn't, we're US centric. We're very, very US centric. We know our country. We know a lot of what's happening with us, but there's so much outside of our world. And they, in the Middle East and North Africa in particular, I can speak to, they understand how everything is interrelated. They're talking about the floods in Kerala, India, and how it's impacted crops that go even to the United States and China. We don't even know where Kerala, India is for the most part. These countries are deeply rooted in the traditions, but also understanding that we're all interconnected. And I fully expected more of a segregationist approach, country by country, and there's nothing like that, at least in my experience. And I went in a dozen places, from Egypt to Nairobi, Omar, Qatar, Bahrain. And I do realize that, we probably have sold ourselves short on learning how the world outside of the United States is beautiful. And there's so much talent out there, and they're yearning to be part of our culture as well. They want to learn from us. So that I mentioned before, my role was Vice President of Education, and I focused on U.S. curriculum schools. The reason they hired me was the company had very few U.S. Administrators, but more and more families were willing to pay top dollar to put their students in U.S. curriculum schools. Had Indian curriculum, national curriculum, depending on what country you're in, UK curriculum, and US curriculum. And the abundance of people wanted to have the US curriculum. I would have never thought that. And so I've come to realize that, we have a lot to learn from other countries. We have a lot to gain by sharing ideas. They are truly, if I sat them down at your dinner table, you would see there's so much more that we're alike than we're different. And they want to learn from us. They want to grow from us. And I think we have a responsibility to be good stewards of the resources and the opportunities we have, and then reach out to others who may not have those same opportunities in life, and make those connections.
Absolutely. You know, I taught a course called the Introduction to U.S. Education, and it was for people who came to the United States specifically to understand what our educational system is like, to get some experience in our teacher education program, and then go back to China or other countries where they can then take that knowledge and improve their education system. And I was floored. You know, the students in that class, they wanted to learn so badly, and they were so grateful to have the opportunity to be here. And it was just amazing. Even the little things, like when a holiday would come, they would all get a little gift for the teacher, you know, and things like that. And I was like, oh, I love this part of education, that I'm getting all these treats and stuff. But they were so appreciative to be part of the U.S. system just for that small period of time. I do want to talk just a little bit before we wrap up about COVID and some of the lessons we've learned. And in particular, you mentioned something that you've seen both as superintendent and in working with the state, and that's this kind of transition away from traditional assessment, filling in bubbles, and showing what you've learned through other kinds of assessment. I think that COVID-19 is an opportunity for educational reform. We've been forced to do things that we weren't doing before, to try to learn and teach in new ways. And I think moving forward, we're going to see different kinds of assessment, different kinds of classroom instruction. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think realistically we'll see in the next few years as far as assessing student learning and making progress in that educational reform?
I think you're exactly right. This is nothing new in education. We've been talking about competency-based education and performance-based tasks, and letting students show what they know instead of having to bubble and short answer what they do. And this has been going on. We talk about overseas. In the UK in particular, they've been doing this for years. You know, you have to show mastery of the content through some delivery, some application piece of it. And I think in the US now, we've been forced to expedite this. We've been given the opportunity as educators to rethink how we structure both grade levels of mastery, you know, of what's next in in your academic career. And the key piece of that we'll see, and I think we're going to see, is I don't think you ever do away with grade levels or certain standards that are required, but I do think you'll have the opportunity to flow through your academic career in a more personalized manner, much like higher ed. You know, you could take courses. If this course fits your need right now, you may take certain courses, show mastery, or what we've put into place here, we have something called credit by demonstration mastery. If you say, I understand this content, I don't want to sit through 9 months or 6 months of hearing this, I think I can show you I understand this. So we give opportunities for students to show credit, get credit by showing mastery, and they matriculate that course without having to sit through and take a test. So I do think this is the new wave. And I do think higher ed, we've done a lot of conversation and planning with higher ed, and they're putting less emphasis on ACT scores and SAT scores and Val, Sal, those kind of things, and more on what opportunities were given to that student, what courses did they have the opportunity to take, did they push themselves through it, and how did they grow through that? Because they realize when you get to the university, it's self-driven anyway. You've got to find a way to reach down and make it apply to you. So we have to do a better job in, especially high school, of helping personalize student growth around, you know, long-term goals and pathways, and less around a checkbox of courses. So I do think it's a trend that's been expedited. I do think it's the new wave. I have my fingers crossed that we don't fall back into traditional concepts that have been outdated for decades. And this might be a pivotal point for our country.
Well, as long as we have educators and innovators like yourself, I think we're going to trend that direction. I'm really grateful. I think we're seeing some awesome things happening right now in education, and I expect that trend to continue. Well, Dr. Stegall, really appreciate your time today. And if people want to learn more about what you're doing or connect with you, where's the best place for them to go?
I spend a lot of time on Twitter and at David Stegall, Stegall. I love to connect. In fact, a few years ago, when I think it was 2007, 2008, when Twitter was first getting up and going, myself and a colleague started the first hashtag NCEd for educator chats to kind of connect to one another. And it's been part of one of the opportunities I've had, because you connect with people like you through Twitter and LinkedIn. And it's a great way for us to, again, physical location shouldn't limit our opportunities. And anyone that'd like to reach out through me on Twitter, I'd be glad to start a conversation and grow together.
Cool. Thank you so much. We'll link to that in the description. Really appreciate you having time for us today, Dr. Stegall. Wonderful message. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.